Hi guys, it's Amy from Cupcakes Decor and welcome to today's tutorial on how to make a gum paste Cattleya orchid like a pro. So in this lesson I've broken it down into 4 easy parts for you to follow along with, but first print out the materials list that's attached to this video and have everything ready and on hand before we begin. Let's get into it. We're going to make the pistil first. We're going to roll it into a ball and then make a rough fat sausage. And then you're going to use your pinchers and you're going to gently pinch each side of it and move down slightly until you get to about 1.5 centimeters and then pinch off the excess. So what you're trying to do is create a V. This is the part where I will indent the circle. So I'll use my Wilton tip and on the front, just on the underside, I'll put a slight indent in. And then I will curve the wings down slightly so that it creates more of a V. When you get towards the end, just sort of roll it a little bit so that you can taper it down. Grabbing a 22 gauge wire, dip it in some edible glue and insert that halfway. And taper it down. And then on the front you want to bring it forward almost on a 75-degree angle, just slightly, not too much. And then make sure that your V or your wings are curled down. Put that aside and let it dry for a few hours. Our next step will be the throat. We're going to roll out our gum paste to about a millimetre thick or 1.5 millimetres. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it too thin, but you don't want it too thick either. And this is where your cornflour pouch comes in handy. You don't want to use icing sugar because the fondant will soak up the icing sugar and it will start to crack. Taking your cutter for the throat, we're going to press down, cut that out. And I'm going to thin and widen the edges now. So I do this by using my pincher fingers or my forefinger and my thumb, and I'll pinch or roll outwards. I don't want to lengthen it, I just want to widen it. And then as I get to the center, I'll sort of just pinch it down. Now taking your foam, your hard block foam, take your ball tool, and I like to use the big side of this ball tool, but you can use whatever you're comfortable with. And I'll just go over the edges just to sort of thin them out a little bit more. And then I'll take the little one and give it a little bit more pressure. Now that it's been thinned somewhat, I'll put it onto my sponge and I'll use my dog ball tool and I'll give it a fairly good zigzagging just to ruffle those petals up a lot more, because Cattleya orchids, their throats have, some of them have really ruffled throats, and I think that's what makes them quite beautiful, some more than others. Now that your throat is all ruffled, I'm going to add the pistil. Actually, that's not very ruffled to my liking. Sometimes, here's a trick, I'll use the smaller end of the dog ball tool and I'll really thin out that thinnest edge, and sometimes it breaks and I like it. I really do, because it gives it that more natural appearance, because they're quite rough in real life. So that's the way I like to have my Cattleya throats. I'll face the back of it towards, away from me, and I'll take some edible glue and I'm going to do a T. I'm going to go across the back and then down about 1.5 centimeters. And I'm going to take my pistol and I'm going to add the throat to the pistol. So picking up your throat very gently, you want the tip of your pistol to sort of sit about here, because that's where the frills start to stop. So if you place it so the tip is half or less, and then wrap one side completely around and then overlap the other side, you'll be able to pull that edge back a little bit and the other edge back slightly and taper the bottom down so that it's all nice and firm. Now I quite like the way that that's come out, so I'm not going to manipulate it very much. You can if you want to, and this does take practice. A lot of cake decorating and flowers, it's a no-no to ridge the edges like this. Most petals like to be flawlessly smooth, but on the Cattleya you're almost doing the wrong thing to get the right look. So take some of your foil, your aluminium foil that you've already got cut up, and just scrunch it up so that the edges are nice and firm. Poke a little hole in it and then bend it so that it supports your throat. You want to have a curve so that it curves down slightly. And that's how you want it to dry. So put that aside, let it dry overnight, at least 24 hours, so that it's rock solid and ready to be assembled. So now we're going to move on to the wing petals. You take your fondant or your gum paste. So in this case I've got homemade gum paste. I still have a lot of Tylose in this lot of gum paste. So we're going to roll this out about 1.5 millimeters thick, not too thin, but we want it thick enough that we can insert a wire into it. Take your wing cutter and we're going to cut 2 petals. We're going to thin and widen the petals. We're going to start from the base, but you want to make sure that you leave a small section of the base at that thickness so we can insert the wire. We're just going to widen and thin it at the same time. Do the same to the other one. If your fingers are sticking, load them up with corn flour. So taking your 24 gauge wire, insert it about 0.5 centimetre into that bottom petal and taper the ends. You want them nice and clean because you will see these from the finished product. Okay. Taking your foam sponge and your dog ball tool, we're going to frill those edges out. I drag my dog ball tool down and I just zigzag or frill, however you find it is easy to do. It is not right or wrong. I do like to tear the edges and give them a nice frill. the other one. Okay, so once you've got them frilled, we're going to turn them over gently and use the very tip of your veining tool, and we're going to off center to where the wire is. In the middle, we're just going to press down slightly and start lifting it up as we get to the end. And what that does is puts a little curve in the petal. And we're going to place this into our spoons, and the good side is going to go down. Be careful not to upset your frills. Again, we'll do this for the second one. Turn it upside down. Place your veining tool in the middle, put a little bit of pressure on it, and then lift that pressure as you move towards the wire. And then you want to set it face down in some spoons and let it dry for 24 hours. Now we're going to move on to the triangle petals. A Cattleya orchid has the two wings, but then behind those two wings it has a top petal and two bottom petals, and they form a triangle. So we're going to do the top petal. We're going to roll out the gum paste to about 1.5 millimeters thick, again the same as the last two petals. Because we want to insert a wire. Now again, like we did before, pinch the bottom and you're going to widen it and lengthen it slightly, but leave the thickness at the base for the wire. Just like that. Take your 24 gauge wire, dip it into some edible glue and insert about 0.5 centimetre in, and then taper. Putting it onto your sponge, use your big ball tool, and we're not frilling this one, we just want to give it a nice thin edge. So moving from the top down and then again on the other side, you've got this nice curl and nice edge. So this top one needs to dry backwards, so it bends backwards. So you're going to turn it upside down, bring in your spoons, and you're going to insert it into your spoons and let it dry. Give it a nice little push. Now we're going to move on to the bottom two triangle petals. We're going to cut these two at the same time. This is using the same cutter that we used for the top triangle petal. It is thinner than the wing petals. We're going to do the same thing we did for the triangle one, lengthening it and widening it. Again, making sure that you leave enough thickness at the base of it, at the very tip, so that 0.5 centimetre worth of wire will fit into it and not poke out the other side. 24 gauge wire for both of these with some edible glue. Insert and taper quite nicely. Using your foam sponge, find the nicer side out of them. Put the nice side up. Using your big ball tool, bring it down from the tip. And using the good side or the front of the petal, you're going to insert it or position it so that the top of the petal or the good side or the front side of the petal is drawing upwards. So it's going to have a curve, but it's drawing upwards. Do the same to your other petal. I push that one a little bit hard. And then again, in your spoons, good side facing up, dry it so it's curving upwards. The top one is drying so that the top is curving down. Put them aside, give them 24 hours to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll paint them. Okay, so now we're going to move on to part 3, the buds. We're going to make 3 different size buds so that we can wire this into a spray. I'm going to do 3 different sizes. So the Cattleya Orchid bud is not as big as the others. So I'm going to go 3 sizes, one quite large, one quite small, and one in the middle. Now this is totally up to your own preference. Just going to roll them in a ball just to sort of see the different sizes. Okay, so my big bud I want a little bit smaller. I'll put that aside. Okay, so we're going to take our 20 gauge wire, which we've got 3 of, and our craft knife. If you don't have a craft knife, you can use your veining tool with the tip. I just find it's easier for me to use the craft knife. We're going to roll them into a teardrop shape. Now these buds are longer and skinnier than moth orchids. So we want to shape it into a long little teardrop. There we go. That's our first bud. And we're going to take a pair of pliers, pinch the end about 1/2 centimetre down and turn it around so it creates a loop with a tag on the end of it. And you need to do that for 3 of them. This just gives it more wire to grasp onto. Dip one of your little loops into some edible glue and just get the excess off because we don't want it too wet. You're going to insert this into your teardrop about 1/4 of the way in and pinch and taper the bottom. Just try and keep that shape. We don't want it short and stout, we want it nice shape at the bottom but nice and thin at the top. Once you've done that, hold on to your bud so that you're not touching or dislodging the wire, and you're going to use the back side of your knife and you're going to go from the bottom to the tip. You're going to put a little bit of pressure on it and the tip should be at your fingertip, and then just push. So the bottom you're dragging upwards until you can get the tip in line with some of the blade, and then you just press in. Now I will do 4 or 5 indentations in this bud because it is a Cattleya but sometimes you'll only see 3. And give it a little. Now once that's been done, we're going to pinch the end and just lightly tip it so it's got a little cowlick on the top. Put that into your foam and place it aside. We're going to repeat for the next couple. Just going to give it another mush up. This is the medium one. Put it in your palm, roll it into a ball, and then taper it into a teardrop. There we go. Insert your wire with the loop a quarter of the way in. Give it a little bit of a taper to the bottom, and then fix up your teardrop. Now this particular bud I'm only going to do 3. Again, insert the back, put a bit of pressure on, drag it towards the tip. When the tip of the bud reaches in contact with the blade, just press it. Roll it over, do the same thing, drag and then press. Drag and then press. Now we're going to pinch the tip and give it a little curve. There we go. And then put it aside. Follow the same instructions for the little one. Back of the knife. I'm only putting 3 in this one, but then I'll tip it. Now we're moving on to part 4, which is assembly and colouring. Today we're going to add a little bit of pink to our pale yellow Cattleya Orchid. I have my top petal up the top, my 2 wings, my throat and my 2 bottom petals. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the wire on my petals. So I will hold the gum paste petal between my forefinger and my thumb, keeping it secure, and then I will bend the wire. I won't do it the other way around because if I hold the wire and bend the gum paste, I could snap that connection. So we're going to bend these at a 90-degree angle. The top and the bottom petals, the triangle petals, I only bend to about a 45-degree angle. You can they'll move once they're on, so it's not a big deal. Now we're going to paint them. Or sorry, I should say dust them. Now I always recommend when you're dusting, start with a light layer of dust and build up to the colour you want, because it's extremely hard to get excess colour off your gum paste flowers. You can do it with a cake, but flowers, it's near impossible, and then you find that you've ruined it. Short of using an airbrush and spraying them, there's no help for them. So we're going to load our brush up, dust off the excess. Now this particular flower I'm going to colour is one of my favourites. It's a yellow, but it has very light pink tones to it. So I'm going to get my dusting brush and go from the edge and lightly dust towards the centre. I don't want heaps of pink on it, I want a tiny little blush. You can put as much pink on it as you want. Once I have enough pink on the throat, I'll then turn it around and I will again do the same thing, but dust it underneath. This part gets missed by a lot of decorators, and I think if you're going to spend the time and effort to make a sugar flower, colour it from all angles so that when it's on the cake people won't believe that it's fake. Okay, now that I've done that, I can see that there's a little bit of excess dust in there. I'll just take a normal dusting brush. This has got no colour on it, and I'll dust out any excess colour or any cornflower that resides on those petals. Now I'm quite happy with that colouring. Still got a little bit of dust in there, and I'll set that aside. Now I'm going to work onto my wing petals. So this particular petal, I want a tiny little bit of blush in that middle section. So I'll go from the bottom and give it a blush, and then just wipe away any excess. And then I'll come from the tip and I will work my way into about halfway. Darker at the tip, but then lighter as it goes along. Again, hold the petal, not the wire. And I'm happy with that. I'll put it aside. I'll show you again, and then I'll give you a close-up. So I'll give it a blush from the bottom, and then I will tip and work my way in. Put them aside. Now the top petal, I do something a little bit different here from the bottom. I'm going to just do one stripe up with my dusting brush, just to give it a little bit of a two-tone effect. So you've got the pink coming from the bottom, which is the darkest, and then it's fading out as it gets to the top. It's very, very light. I'm not sure if the camera will show it. My two bottom petals. I'll work out which one's left, which one's right. Now on these ones I'm going to do something a bit different. On the bottom part of my petal, I want this to be the darkest pink, and I want it to be very light just up here. So I will take my brush and I will brush that bottom half first, and then just halfway up the top. So I hope you can see what I'm doing, because I'm really relying on my camera here rather than my words. Now I'm going to do the other side, but you need to make sure that you're doing as a mirrored angle. So mirror the same thing, so it won't be, if you turn the petal around the other way, you're going to be doing it on the top half. So I will dust this bottom part so that when the petals are sitting opposite each other, they've got the same colouring on the same side, the bottom side of that petal. Just going to dust off the excess colour. Just put my dust away. Now we're going to assemble. Take some of your flower tape or your floral tape and your throat. I like to wind the tape from halfway towards the bottom end of my wire, and I'll twirl it and pull it tight till I get to the bottom of the throat. And this is where I'm going to start positioning my wing petals. So my wing petals are going to be a little bit further back from my throat. It depends, how far back depends on the angle and the tip of your wing petal. So my wing petal, I want the tip of it to come in line with the frills, almost just behind the frills on my throat. Wire your first petal on. Rip the tape off, and that's positioned. And then again do the same thing for the next one, which will go on the other side. And just position, now this one's easy, just position it to be in line with the first petal that you put on it, and give it a good tape together. Pull off your excess. Now you may find that your petals have moved around a bit, so just reposition them. This is a bit hard doing it upside down for you guys, but if you can see it, I can see it. Okay, so I've actually turned it around the right way now. I think that you guys can see it better. I need my top petal, and I'm going to position this petal 1/2 centimetre back from the wing petals, and then I'll tape that in. Now my bottom petals, make sure you've got the right one for the left and the right. I will position mine at the same junction where I have my top petal, and I will tape them in. Sometimes I'm lazy and I'll tape them all together in one go, but it takes a lot of practice, and sometimes the petals move and then I have to undo it. So one petal at a time is usually pretty good. And I'll always leave at least 10 centimetres of stem on my gum paste flowers and cut the excess off. And using that extra tape that I have, I will continue to twirl around and then double back on itself twice, just to cover those exposed wires. So should I not have this wired and I put it straight into my cake, those wires must be secure and not exposed, because some metals have some chemical reactions with ingredients. Not all, but some do, and I just don't want to risk it. It's not nice to have a bite of something and get a metally taste. So now that I've done that, I'm going to position my petals the way I want them to be. I'm actually pretty happy with that. That looks really pretty and I love it. Now, because these petals have been dusted and they're very, very light, I'm going to give you a tip. If you have a kettle or a steaming kettle, specifically for cake decorating, which works better, but a kettle will do. If you get your kettle boiling and the steam coming out of the top, once it's fully steaming, you can put your flower in and twirl it around over that steam a little bit of distance away until you get a thin coating of steam on your petal. You will actually see that the colour that you've put on it has intensified and it gets darker. So if you wanted to do that, you can. If you're doing more colours, layers, always put your colours on in layers. So don't try and mix the one colour off in one go. Put a layer of pink on, then you might put some purple in there and try and blend them together, and it just really takes practice. So I'll put this aside, and now we're going to move on to our buds. To colour these buds, you will need a pink and a moss green. Now I'll use the moss green, adding tiny little bits, and I will bring it from the bottom of the bud up and then release the pressure. And I will do that on wherever I've got an indent where the petal lining is, and I'll continue around. On the very tip, I'll have a very light pink tip, so I'll just tip that end, and I'll continue that on for the rest of these petals. Now we're going to wire all these flowers together. So I'll get my tape ready. I always use white tape, mainly because I can colour any colour I want to. I do still use the brown and the green, but it just depends what you're using it for. So I find if you always buy and stock up on white, you can colour it any colour you like. So I'm going to look for, I've got an extra one here. I'll put that aside, but I have my two big ones and my little bud. I'm going to start with the biggest bud, and I'm going to take the tape and stretch it tight and wind it around the stem all the way to the base, and then I'll double it back down, making sure that it's stuck quite firmly. And then I will add the second biggest one, but I will take it straight to the wire. So the bud is flush with the wire, and I will tape that so you can't see the wire. Take it all the way down and pull that tape off. Now with the smallest bud, we're going to do the same we did to start with. Take the tape, go all the way up, double back, come all the way back down again. But this time we'll stop about about 2 centimetres down, and we will bend that wire where the tape has started, and we'll secure it just below. I'm securing this 1/2 centimetre below the bottom bud and tape that together. all the way down. Now that they're taped together, you can manipulate and maneuver your buds to sit how you prefer them to sit. Here's another one that I did earlier. You can bend that wire so that it sits at a more realistic angle. Now set that aside. Take some more tape. We're going to tape our flowers to these buds now. So I'm going to take my first flower and I'm going to put my finger behind the flower where the petals start, and I'm going to bend the wire. And that is where that bend is where that will hit the wire to the bud section. So I will bring it down a little bit and position it so that overall looking, here's the secret, I don't want these buds to be sticking out so far that they're lanky, but I don't want them to be too short that they hide behind the flower. If you look on my flower, you can see that there's, where I've positioned it, I can take a semicircle and they're almost in line with that semicircle. And that's what you really want. You want them to be nice and together and not symmetrical, but you want them to be in proportion to each other. Some people can get this, it's natural, florists are natural at it, hence why they become florists. Some people won't have a problem putting flowers together, they've got a good eye for it. Other people need to practice a little bit more. If you're that person that needs to practice a little bit more, just practice with anything. You can get, pick flowers on your morning walks with some foliage or some buds and just work at wiring them all together and just practice. Now that I've got that one in, I'm going to do a second one. I'm going to do the same thing, put my fingers behind the wire and bend down. And this time I will turn the flower I originally put, I'm right-handed, so I do it right-handed. I will turn that flower to my right and I'll position the next flower behind that flower, but I will come down a slight bit. Okay, sometimes you might need to move your wire a little bit. Okay, so now that my flower is in there, I've actually positioned the flower petals so that this top petal fills in this gap. They almost overlap. I'll just bring this back here. Bring it down a little bit. There we go. That's how I want it. So now I'm going to secure it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. If you like the way it looks, don't let anybody tell you different. Just do what you think looks great. Okay, so now you can actually see how this throat is wobbling? That is wobbling because there isn't a connection strong enough to keep the wire and the glue in place with that. So always make an extra petal, an extra throat, an extra everything. Always make sure you've got at least 2 extras, because you don't know that this is going to happen until it happens, and it happens to the best of us. So don't fret, or you might drop. Sometimes I've dropped one and had to start again. So now that we've got those 2 sorted, you can get away with putting another one down here, but it needs to be quite far away. So I will do the same thing by bending, putting a bend in the wire, but this time I'm going to come right down to the end. Actually needs to be a little bit longer, and I would put this one right down the end. Now this is a trick that I will share with you. If you have got a short piece of wire and you can't secure your flower to it comfortably, take 20 gauge wire, fold it in half or just 2 pieces together, and you're going to attach this wire to this stem. Sometimes I will wrap it around, not very often, but I'll just show you what happens when you wrap it around. Just tape it, make sure you've got a good amount of tape on there, and then double back. And now that stem is long enough for us to add this extra flower. However many orchids you want to put on your spray, or whatever arrangement that you're making it into, add as many as you like. Now, after each petal has been, or each flower has been added, always take a stand back, put your work down and take a look at it, and make sure that each flower fits in with the others, because it's very hard to manipulate your petals and place your flowers together if you bunch them all together and then try and work them through. So always add one flower at a time. I made extra buds because I do love my orchid sprays, and this particular orchid, orchid spray, I'm only going to have 3 flowers on it, but I want 2 sections of buds. So I want this bud to semi-sit out somewhat that distance from this flower. So I will put a kink into that wire. I will position it up against the main stem, and I will position it to how I think I want that to look. And then I will add it with my tape. Remember, if you're using white tape, you can always dust or paint with edible paints, of course, and edible dusts. You can always paint this stem to be green. It's not a deal breaker. I just have to use green. You can paint it any color you like. Okay, so now that I've got all my flowers on, now's the part where I will bend this wire, this main wire, and put my flowers in their final positions. You can use wire cutters or pliers to help you with this part. I find to make them pretty sturdy that I can usually manipulate them with my fingers. Alright, that should be your finished project, or close to it. I've put a bend, slight bend, so this is my main wire, and I've put a slight bend just here, just so it has a curve in it. And then from the other side, that is what it will look like. Thank you for watching this tutorial on how to make a gum paste Cattleya orchid like a pro. I certainly enjoy teaching you all, and I love seeing photos of your creations and answering any questions that you might have. I have many tutorials available, some are free, some are paid, and they can be accessed via the website on the link below. See you next time.